Okay, so picking up for the last part of today's lecture, we were looking at, is private media ownership a good thing? We said there are some good things, right? You have less oversight by the government. You have, in theory, less intervention by the government. The con here is um, that what drives private companies is profit, and profit isn't always oriented on making sure that we are being accurately presented with information. Profit can be, very self-serving, and we're going to give them information that's good for us. And this is a problem, right? Because looking at below, the six major media companies, we have GE, we have News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. Between these six companies, they own an incredible amount, and this is just a smattering. They own, 10 times the number of television channels, um, that these do. And so if Disney, as the parent company of ABC and ESPN, and they've now bought Fox and whatnot, if they've decided that they don't want to, this message that's going out, or this new piece of news is damaging to them, don't show it. um, I think there's always that worry that that's going to happen. Um, that these companies maintain a huge control over what's shown, what's seen, what we're allowed to know. And there is a very famous Saturday Night Live cartoon um, that I'm going to show now because I think it exemplifies kind of what I'm talking about. So hopefully I can get it to work. Um, and I'm just going to ask that you follow along. Okay, so that is obviously a Saturday Night Live parody, but honestly, like that has never been shown on TV other than one time. So even all the um, rebroadcasts of that particular SNL skit, that particular skit, that particular video is has been cut out, presumably because NBC and Westinghouse/GE doesn't want that sort of messaging going out. And so when major media companies own such a huge swath of where we get our information, it can be problematic. So now let's take a look at, what do political scientists and media experts, what have they found on what news gets covered? And the fact that, as I said, most of our media outlets are privately owned and have a profit-driven model, they require that news must be different, must be timely, must be of high viewing interest. Um, you know, Boring but important stories generally don't sell, and you don't have to copy this. But the quote that really sticks out for me is, "What kind of news gets covered? Well, it's a man biting a dog, not a dog biting a man. A dog biting a man wouldn't be that interesting, right? It'd be pretty commonplace, it'd be pretty normal. But a man biting a dog, now that's weird. Put that on TV." And so, media outlets tend to tailor what they show to what is going to be entertaining towards the average viewer. Long, complicated stories must be hugely important to gain coverage. So, this is a problem, right? So, like, let's talk about the Great Recession, or let's talk about really like complex things, like getting information out about vaccination programs and testing, and COVID, and um, looking at some of the stuff that was coming out of Iran for a long time, or even long election stories on fraud. Like, basically, we've gotten to this place where most media outlets tend to only show something if it can be shown in 20 to 30-second snippets, because long, complicated stories are just too difficult to maintain people's attention with. And so this has shifted the way the landscape. Now, um, another, and this is obviously a vocabulary word, is that where does news come from, right? And fundamentally, it starts with journalists. It starts with reporters. And these journalists, or these reporters, they're assigned by their company, by the Colorado Springs Gazette or the New York Times or CNN. They're assigned something called a beat, and a beat is basically um, a specific location where news tends to often come from. So, for example, maybe I am the education reporter, and I am supposed to be incredibly educated and following all things related to education in our country. Or maybe I'm, working in the congressional beat where I am tasked with covering all the news that's coming out of Congress. Or maybe I'm the police beat. I work the police beat where I'm covering crime and stories coming out of that particular part. Or maybe I'm, in the White House and I'm a White House presidential reporter. In the West Wing, that's C.J. Craig. She works with all the White House correspondents who cover the White House. That's their beat. And the reason for this is beat reporters, this model has been used because media outlets have realized that when you have a reporter that's assigned to cover a specific area, like education or crime or the environment or Congress or the White House, that they become real experts on their beat and they become able to write about and cover the news from a very educated place. These beat reporters also tend to build sources. They tend to build relationships with people on their beat who will talk more honestly with them, who will, give them information that they're asking for, who will they'll leak stories to, right? Like some of the most famous stories in our country's last 50 years. Like, let's take Watergate, right? How did that story come out? It came out because a specific person, um, going by the pseudonym Deep Throat, a rather unfortunate nickname today, but went by it in the 1960s because he used a voice changer to mask his voice. But he was in NSA, worked in the National Security Agency, found out some stuff that the Nixon administration was doing, and released that tape and that information to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein at the Washington Post. These Woodward and Bernstein were beat reporters covering national security issues, and this guy knew them and knew that they could trust him, and so released this story to them. And this has been a very important way of how reporting gets done. Is journalists develop expertise in their field, they build relationships, and they get stories as a result. Also, as a result of this, politicians and government tends to learn and know these beat reporters too, and they use the media to spread their message. Just as the media needs politicians to basically keep them in the know and give them information. Now, this is a really interesting concept here, and if you've tuned me out here, I want you to tune in. This happens a lot in today's society, and being able to call this out and identify when this is happening is going to separate you from less educated people. But beat reporters, people who build those relationships, who know the people on their beat. So if I'm covering the White House, I know the press secretary. I probably even know the president. I know the communications directors. Those are all people that I've gotten to know pretty well. And so as a result, the government will oftentimes feed information through beat reporters. Through something called an anonymous source, and they'll give this information and they'll say, "Okay, go ahead and write about this." Um, Say it's an anonymous source, say it's unconfirmed. The beat reporter will publish that story, and the government will watch people's reaction. They'll basically, they'll watch, and if people get really angry, they'll say, "Ah, no, 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 okay, that's an unconfirmed story. They, clearly didn't know what they're talking about," and they'll say, "Hey, scratch that idea. People are not having it." Or they'll feed it out as a trial balloon, and people will go, "Oh, this is great. I love it," and they'll come out 2 days later and say, "Hey, we're doing exactly what this person reported." And so the government will use reporters to feed information out to as trial balloons to sort of gauge the public reaction. If the public reacts poorly, they just abandon it and they don't ever do it. If the public loves it, then they basically claim it and get credit. But the last 3.5 minutes, I'm going to show you this clip from a show called Newsroom. We'll talk about it tomorrow in class.
Governor Romney in the lead with 37% of New Hampshire's likely Republican voters, well ahead of Rick Perry with 18%.
These are all beat reporters, by the way.
14%, then Michelle Bachmann and Herman Cain.
You forgot about Huntsman, Gingrich, and Santorum.
And soon you will too.
Taylor.
Oh, we have a new student in class.
Jim Harper, ACN.
Jim Harper, ACN. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When the gay soldier asked his question, Did Will McAvoy expect the candidates to waterboard each member of the audience until they admitted to exercising their First Amendment rights?
I doubt it.
What did he expect?
I guess for at least one of them, perhaps the front runner, to tell the audience that he wasn't interested in the votes of anyone who was booing. Not for nothing, but he'd have won the election that night.
How long have you been covering politics?
Almost 2 weeks.
Right. What is your question, Jim?
In the past, Governor Romney said that his proudest accomplishment in public service was bringing health care reform to Massachusetts. I've been to 28 events in 11 days, and he hasn't brought that up.
And your question? We're really going to do this?
Has anyone on the bus asked why?
No, thank God you got here.
Taylor, why is it...
Governor Romney is very proud of his accomplishments in Massachusetts with regard to health care. But his plan is nothing like Obamacare, which the governor has promised to repeal on his first day in
What
office.
exactly are
All
the...
right, that's it, guys.
One more question?
Sure.
What do you expect us to report tonight?
The governor was in good spirits today as the campaign touted the results of the latest New Hampshire Journal poll.
A new poll has the Romney campaign feeling good about the Sanders campaign spokesperson reiterating the candidate's pledge that a President Romney would repeal and expressing no expectation of surges from Huntsman, Gingrich, or Santorum. With the Romney campaign in Concord, I'm Jim Harper, ACN.
Some news, everybody. Huntsman fired his New Hampshire campaign manager, Ethan Eilon, which is not surprising, and replaced him with Sarah Crawford Stewart, who most recently worked on the Valenti campaign, which was, of course, a huge success. So, those of you who feel Huntsman hasn't been getting enough coverage, shit, Jim, do you have any friends in school at all?
What's the governor's plan with regard to Iran?
Oh, the governor said repeatedly that he won't allow a nuclear Iran.
Or what's his plan?
We talked about jobs
How's he
today.
going to restart Israeli-Palestinian negotiations?
By getting elected president.
Yesterday, he said 4 times that health insurance premiums have gone up $2,500 due to Obamacare. They've gone up $1,500, and it's due to higher health care costs. Any comment?
No.
The jobless recovery chart buried in day one job one, Isabella Cotton, seems to imply that the Obama recovery took place in 2007 when Obama wasn't president. Any comment?
Somebody want to get Jim a bounty?
How's the governor plan to work with what will probably be a new Islamist government in Egypt?
We talked about jobs today.
I'd like a half-hour face-to-face with the candidate.
Me too.
A half hour.
Sit down, Jim.
Anybody want to join me? Or are you really okay not doing any reporting?